that Mendel? Okay, we are ready to begin. We are screen sharing. So everyone see with me this piece from Sefaria.org?
Yes.
Okay, so welcome to Positivity Bias, episode 3. This is I'm gonna do a remastered version after this that's gonna be on Spotify. So this series is becoming a podcast series, but like more recorded.
Hey.
What?
Hello.
Hi. So now we're at episode 3, and we're discussing the importance of seeing things through a good eye, seeing things through a positive lens. You know, the famous great sage Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students, and he set them out on a mission to find the key to life. And each of them came back, and one of them said Lev Tov, right? But one of them said Ayin Tov, a good eye. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanah said, you need a good eye. If you have a good eye, everything else follows. With a good eye, in other words, it's not what you see, it's what you look for. So if you're looking to see the positive light in everything, then you'll see positive. If you look to see the negative, you'll see negative. So I bring this text over here from, first a joke to lighten the mood. You know, there was once a new rabbi, and the day he was appointed, a community member passed away. And unfortunately, he didn't know the community member. So here he's appointed to give a eulogy, and he doesn't know anything about the member. So he says, maybe someone from the community could come up to say a few kind words about this man, and nobody's getting up. So the rabbi says, this is terrible. In a community, you can't find anything good to say about a fellow community member. Finally, one man raises his hand. He said his brother was much worse. You know, so we're always the cup half full, cup half empty. So here's an example, a classic example where you see how the Rebbe saw something different than everybody else. So here I'm going to read a piece from the Tractate of Chagiga. It's in the Talmud. And Reish Lakish, who, if you recall, himself was a sinner for half his life, for a part of his life, chief of the mafia. And then he ended up becoming one of the greatest Jewish leaders of Israel. So he says the following statements. The fire of Gehenna of hell, has no power over the sinners of Israel. And he goes on to develop a rule, explaining why. And he says, this is the statement he says. The sinners of Israel who are filled with good deeds as a pomegranate. Just like a pomegranate is full of seeds, the sinners of Israel are full of mitzvahs. So that was the statement. So we're going to focus on this one line here. The sinners of Israel who are filled with good deeds as a pomegranate. So there was once this non-Chabad Jew who was visiting Crown Heights, and he came to meet with the Rebbe. And he told the Rebbe, and he shared the story after it happened, but he said he met the Rebbe, and they got into discussion. And the Rebbe asked him, you know, what's on your mind? What are things that you are interested in? So he said, you know, I was by a rabbi this past week who asked a brilliant question. He asked, how can you call someone how can the sinners of Israel be full of mitzvahs? If they're sinners, they can't be full of mitzvahs. So the Rebbe said, that's interesting, because I had the exact opposite question. How could someone who's full of mitzvahs be called a sinner? So you could either focus on the fact that he's a sinner, or you could focus on all the mitzvahs that he's doing. So that's just the general lens. And we see how having a good eye sets us up for life. So we're going to do an illusion. We're going to look at a famous illusion, but hopefully you haven't seen it yet. And if you could type in the chat, if you have chat tools, or if you don't have chat tools, what do we see here? Describe what you see in this picture? Two-word description. If you could put it in the chat box. Okay. We have one answer came in. Okay. The point of this illusion is that some people look at this picture and say a young girl, and other people look at this picture and see an old woman. Now, for certain people, you see young girl, it's impossible to see the old woman. For others, they see old woman and they can't see the young girl until you point it out to them that from a certain angle, this is the mouth of the old woman and this is the wrinkled nose of the old woman, you know, and this is the eye of the old woman, or this is the ear of the young woman and this is a necklace or some hairline. So, you know, certain studies have shown that a lot of how you see this picture has to do with your past experience in life. I don't know how exactly, but your past experience dictates what you're going to see in this picture. It's almost like the famous blue and black dress or gold and white dress, and all these other interesting things. So what we see is quite important to how we see the world. And so we have to train ourselves to see things with a redemptive light, that what other people think is incomprehensible, we have to find the redeeming quality in everything. So here's an interesting story of a photographer named Levi Fredin. He had many beautiful pictures of the Rebbe that we have today, is due to his credit. And he decided to make an exhibition in Tel Aviv. Now, Tel Aviv is not the most religious place in Israel. And so when they showed this exhibition, the exhibition was called 770, after, you know, pictures of what goes on in 770. And it was quite a shock to many people. You know, the whole idea of a religious court, a Hasidic community. This was in 1976. It was a part of Bar Ilan University, and there was the Levi Fredin wrote a report to the Rebbe about this exhibition and how it went. See, in the guest book, one of the journalists who came to see the exhibition wrote in the guest book the following: "With all due respect to the superb photography, the subject you have chosen is extremely clerical and takes us back to the primitive darkness of the Middle Ages." Okay, that's what she wrote in the guest book. And when Levi Fredin went back to New York, he gave the guest book to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe flipped through it, and he said, "Please compliment the journalist for her strength of character. It takes fortitude to differ from all the other responses." Evan was saying, "Great job, great job." And here one journalist was able to stand out from the peer pressure and to say something different. So the Rebbe said, congratulate her. So while one person might take offense, you know, here the Rebbe was saying, congratulate her for her fortitude. But then the Rebbe added another line. But tell him also that not everything in the Middle Ages was dark. Which is another area. We see these two sentences where the Rebbe had redemptive vision in the reading over here. The Middle Ages was one of the darkest periods for the Jewish people. We had many massacres and pogroms and the Kazakhs and many terrible things for the Jewish people. But the Torah scholarship and the religious piety of the Jewish people back then was also extremely strong. So while in one sense it was extremely dark and crippling, on the other hand, there were parts of it that were extremely bright. And, you know, the mystics in Safat was during the Middle Ages and many other things. Here's another example where we see someone who, this is quite a fascinating story. So there was a period where there was very strong attempts of Christian missionaries to try to recruit try to recruit Jews who are very vulnerable, who are seeking meaning and identity, and they didn't find it in their synagogue of old, and so they were very easily swayed. So the Rebbe founded an organization to counteract the attempts of the missionaries, as well as other French cults. But the Rebbe knew that in those years, there were people that would not seek out this organization's help if the Rebbe's name was attached to it. So the Rebbe made sure he was an anonymous backer of the organization, and many rabbis were involved in this organization without even knowing that the Rebbe was the one behind the whole organization. And the leader of the organization was not even a Chabad Chassid. It was someone who the Rebbe felt would be a neutral party and would be able to have success in this area. However, at a certain point, people realized that the Rebbe was behind it. And one of the organization's leaders, who was antagonistic to Chabad, for whatever reason, removed his name from the organization and arranged for a creation for a new organization with the same mission. And that pulled away a lot of the funds and support to the original organization. And so the original manager of the organization came to the Rebbe. He wasn't a Chabad Chassid, but he said, how could this rabbi do such a thing? So petty and so narrow-minded to split. We have to put all our wood behind one arrow. And here this other rabbi splits the cause in two, and we're going to be less effective. And how petty of him. So the Rebbe responded by pulling out a Talmud. And in the Talmud, it goes through an analysis. It says, in a Jewish calendar, we can have 12 months or 13 months. If you have 13 months in a year, the summer will begin, Passover will be warmer. If you have 12 months, sometimes Passover will be cooler. So there was a committee in this Sanhedrin who would decide, should we have 12 months or should we have 13 months? Now it's already a fixed system where we have every 21 years, we have 7 leap years, a 13-month year. But in those days, it was by the Sanhedrin. And the Talmud says 2 people cannot sit on the Sanhedrin for this decision. It's the king, a Jewish king, and the high priest. Why? The commentary explained, because the king pays his soldiers by the year, so he has a bias to make sure it's always 13 months. And the high priest, he works on Yom Kippur in barefoot, and he has to immerse in a mikvah that's freezing cold water. They didn't have heaters back then. And if Yom Kippur would be in October or September, it would change whether his mikvah was warmer or colder. Now, we have to remember the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, was the most spiritual religious figure in the Jewish community, and a Jewish king as well. Wasn't a dictator. They were the heart of the people. And yet the Rebbe says the Talmud recognizes that even the greatest of the greats sometimes have a subconscious bias, that they're convinced that they're doing it for the good of the people. But subconsciously, the reason they're persuaded towards that way is because subconsciously they know they have a benefit by it either being 13 months for the high priest or 12 months for the high priest or 13 months for the king. So that was the introduction that the Rebbe told this leader. And then the Rebbe said, this is just human nature. Even a Jewish king and a high priest are prone to subconscious calculations of self-interest. And then the Rebbe told the manager of this organization as follows. He said, this other rabbi who left the organization, you have to remember that before the war, he had a massive yeshiva. And that whole yeshiva was destroyed. All the students were lost. And now he's trying to rebuild his yeshiva. And the donors of his yeshiva are antagonistic to Chabad. So you can't blame this rabbi. In other words, you have to understand, you have to see where the rabbi is coming from that if he doesn't remove his name from the organization, he's going to lose the supporters, and it's very difficult for someone to give up on trying to rebuild his yeshiva after it totally being destroyed. So you see something quite amazing here, where the manager saw pettiness in a rabbi who is, because of some petty argument, decided to splinter an important organization. And the Rebbe didn't disagree with the facts, but decided to focus on the redemptive nature that this rabbi would, you can't blame him because he was trying to save his yeshiva. And there's another point to consider here. The way we see others helps them see themselves that way. So if we put a magnifying glass to our spouse's faults, they will start to absorb that in their psyche that, yeah, they are a bad person. If we see our children's faults and put a magnifying glass to their faults, they'll start to feel like broken people. And the same thing as people that are strangers. If we focus the positive within them, that magnifies the positivity within them. So we always have to see it that way. So here's one last story, two last stories to bring this home. So story number one is a guy named Shelly Bear. He says he was a young student. His mother came into an audience with the Rebbe. He was not a Chabad Chassid. He says, the mother told the Rebbe as follows: my son Shalom has been thrown out of yeshivas, and his teachers say he's not listening. The rabbis are complaining that he doesn't like the school, the homework, the program. He eats stuff in the middle of class. The mother was crying and crying because she was searching for answers. And the Rebbe turned to Shalom, and he said, come here. So Shalom came here. And he was all ready for a battle because he's been to many other prominent Jewish leaders that his mother schlepped him to before. And he says, you're the Rebbe? So the Rebbe said, looked with a big smile and says, are you a good boy? He says, no. Said, do you like school? No. Do you listen to your mother? No. He was ready for this. And then the Rebbe said, you tell the truth. Telling the truth is very good. And at that moment, Shelley's whole life turned around. He realized that, in other words, his defenses dropped, and he realized that the Rebbe saw in him that he's good, and that gave him the power to exercise that innate goodness that he had within him. Here's another example, bringing this to practice, because we may have a difficult time with seeing goodness in people who others see trouble. So in 1960, there was a guy named Yale Butler. He was the son of one of the leading Orthodox families in Pittsburgh. He was in 7th grade. He was friendly with a Chabad rabbi there named Rabbi Schusterman, and he became the editor of the school newspaper. See, he wanted the school newspaper to become more prominent, so he decided to put out a controversial front page. And in it, he wrote an article comparing one of the local residents this was the 1960s, who used to wear an army hat and army jacket. And he was a follower of Chabad teaching. And somehow he got the nickname Castro because this gentleman looked like Fidel Castro from Cuba. And so in this introduction to his newsletter, the new issue of that year, he wrote a whole fictional account how Fidel Castro recruited members of Chabad in 770 to save him from an attack. And it became so controversial, this article in the community of Pittsburgh. So he got a lot of eyeballs, but that newsletter stopped printing after that story. It was like the scandal of the century. Rabbi Schusterman convinced this boy, Yale, to come to meet the Rebbe in Crown Heights. And he had, he was not ashamed. So he said, sure. So he came to meet the Rebbe in Crown Heights until he noticed that on the Rebbe's desk was the newsletter. And then he started to get nervous. He's like, oh no, what's the Rebbe gonna say? So the Rebbe told him, the Rebbe spoke to Yale warmly, and he was telling Yale, I know your family very well and what they do for Pittsburgh. And the Rebbe said, you know, a person has to use whatever talent they have to promote Jewish unity and love for one another. And that was the whole focus of, if you have a talent, you have to use it, and you have to use it in the most positive way. So instead of the whole encounter being, Yale, you're one big mess and one big trouble, it was, you're talented, you're gifted, and you have to focus it in the right way. By 1982, Yale had become a rabbi and also the publisher of the B'nai B'rith Messenger. And he used to review his subscribers. One night he's reviewing his subscribers, and he sees that the Rebbe paid for a subscription to follow whatever he was writing in that magazine many years later. You know, and once someone met the Rebbe and told the Rebbe an account, oh, I know Yale Butler from B'nai B'rith Messenger. And the Rebbe says, yeah, I know him. He's a gifted writer from a very young age. You know, so while someone might have saw a troublemaker in Yale, the Rebbe saw a gifted student. And that's something we always have to practice, to always see redeeming qualities in other people. And that enhances, it's not just see the good because why see the bad? It's if you focus on the good, you make that person should increase in his goodness. Okay, very good. Chodesh Tov, and
beautiful
we'll see you Tuesday or Friday. No, not Friday, actually. Yeah.
Rabbi, will this be? Will this? Can we get a transcript of this? Because this was really beautiful today. I really liked it. And
written? How about podcasts? Would they be good for podcasts?
Yeah, anything.
The truth is, this whole thing is online. The whole book is online, free on Chabad.org. I'll share with you. Okay. This is a rearrangement of that book. This is not direct. I'm not reading you directly chapter for chapter, but definitely I'll find with you a chapter that's very close to this.
Yeah, but your last point is just absolutely beautiful. We just need more of that in the world, and it just needs to be spread. So Yasher Koach, beautiful.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, so I'll share with you an email later.
Sure.
I'll show you a link.
Take care, Milton.
Chazak, take care.
Good to see you.
Chodesh Tov,
Chodesh Tov.
And all the best this coming week. Okay.
Yes.
You should be ready in Yerushalayim.
Amen.
You know, by the base of Mikdash.
Amen.
It's time already.
Like my picture.